And at first, I give it a couple minutes for people to start joining.
Just whatever. I'm just gonna follow along.
Slow down, come on. To the people, y'all. Hey, turn it loose, turn it up, get on it, get into it, get involved, feel the bass, got to cut their balls. Hey, to the folks with the 808, like I said before, we not playing them folks. Turn it up, hold the track, yeah. Internationally known, I hold the microphone, making sure the folks will never leave you alone. To my sisters just remiss them. Let's get it together, make a nation, you can bet on it, don't sleep on it, but the truth so deep in it. Turn it up, turn it up, power to the people, turn it up, turn it up, come on, y'all, pump it up, hit that bass, power to the people, turn it loose, turn it loose, we shall overcome, they say. Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Tonight, we're hosting the People Power Hour. As you know, my name is Terrell McKinney, running for state legislature in District 11. And I have a special guest tonight, Senator Ernie Chambers. How you doing, Senator?
Oh, quite well, thanks. Yes,
It's great to have you. I wanted to bring you on because I think it's important to get your perspective on things, and I feel like that's what's missing sometimes. I don't think we do enough to honor you and also to put you in spaces so people can hear how you feel about things. And I felt like it was important to bring you on because this is our first time doing a People Power Hour for the general election. And it was one of my dreams, one of my wishes, like, hey, we have to try to get Senator Chambers on because I know you endorsed me, but I also felt like it would be great to get your perspective on what's going on as far as the state of our community, the COVID-19 response, and also the social unrest that's been going on throughout our country.
So you want me to make a comment or two?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I've been in this world 82 years. My birthday is July 10th, which will be 83, but I will be into my 84th year. So there are a few things that I have seen, a number of experiences that I've had, and you begin to see as you make your way through this world that people don't really change. The script doesn't alter that much. Different people read it, different people put inflections on it. But the problems that we've had as Black people have always been basically the same. We're in a society governed by white people who do not respect us, who would like to intimidate us and misuse and mistreat us. And if we allow them to do it, that's exactly what is going to happen. I got into the legislature about 50 years ago. I served 46 years. 4 years I had to sit out because of term limits. And that in itself is an example of what white people do. They can never say that I violated any rules, any laws, any provisions of the Constitution. The problem they have with me is that I learned their laws, their Constitution, the rules of the legislature, and applied them so well, better than anybody had ever done, better than anybody was expected to have done. And the mistake they made was in judging me the way they judge white people. I got into the legislature because Black people requested that I do it. When I was in high school, just a slip of a lad, grown people came to me with problems they had with the police, with landlords, and the kind of things that a youngster should not have to do anything about, would not even be expected to know anything about. But what marked me and made me different from other people was that I didn't have any fear. I was not timid. I didn't think I was Superman. In fact, I knew I was not Superman. I knew I couldn't even whip everybody in my neighborhood, but nobody in my neighborhood was going to make me back down by threatening me or being bigger than I am. If he was going to do something to me, he couldn't do it with words. He'd have to actually do it. And I didn't have that many fistfights or physical confrontations as I was growing up. But in the years when I was younger, that was a common thing because knives were very unusual. Anybody who would use a knife was felt to be a dirty fighter. Guns were out of the question. And if you were knuckling it with somebody and you knuckled somebody upside the head, then the next time you won't be able to hit that hard. You'll try to hit a soft spot on the body. And sometimes because we got in trouble, if we were in fistfights, to show our, it may seem strange, code of respect or maybe fear, we would agree that neither one of us would hit either of us in the face or any part of our body where a bruise would show, so that when you got home, you didn't have to explain why you were in a fight. And here's why I'm saying that. When I got in the legislature, it was because a black man had been appointed when Senator Danner died to finish out Danner's term. His name was George Althouse. He was very old. He did not know his own age. And he said on the floor of the legislature, he served when there was only one special session, that if God put the white man in command, there's nothing we as black people can do about it. The community was outraged. They asked me to run against him. I said, I have no interest in doing it. They said nobody else would do the job. So I filed for the office hoping somebody else would. As it turned out, a young man named Michael Adams, whose forebears had been in the legislature, and when we would appear, each one of us campaigned for the other. I said, if Michael wasn't run, if I had known Michael was going to run, I wouldn't be running. If I were casting a vote, I would cast my vote for Michael. Michael would say the same thing. As it turned out, I won. I thought I was running for a term of years. I didn't know I was going to get a life sentence, that the people in my community would not parole me. So I decided that I'm not going to be like people who get in public office. I'm not going to knock on people's doors and tell them to vote for me. I was not going to ask them for money. I was not going to campaign. If they really liked what I did and believed in me, when time came to cast a ballot, that's what they would do. So down through the years, I never campaigned. People sometimes would get angry because I would say, I'm not running for office, I'm taking a leisurely stroll. The people in the community knew me for decades. They knew that the blood of this community was in me, and my blood was in that community. I never betrayed us, never sold out. Nobody could buy me off. Nobody could frighten me off. Everything that I had to say, I would say it openly. If I had somebody to say it to, whether it was the governor, the chief of police, drug dealers in our community, I would want to confront that person and have it out with him. There's none of this thing of speaking behind my hand and pretending I didn't say it, throwing a rock and hiding my hand. So people have always known what my position is. I was on a program, Channel 22 with Cox. I talked about political issues, history, philosophy, the law, the Constitution, and the racism in this society. And it was so effective that Mayor Stothert didn't like it. Ben Gray didn't like it. When they put pressure on Cox, Channel 22 was taken off the air. The entree that people had to me was removed, but I could still be contacted because my phone number is in the phone book. But here is what I explain to people. Elections give people the opportunity to determine whom they want to represent them. I'm not going to ask anybody for a vote. If you all like what I do and you know what I do, you agree with my stands and you know what they are, then you'll vote for me. If you don't, you won't. And I'm not going to be angry at you. You do not have to lie to me and say you voted for me when you didn't. You don't have to say anything. The wonderful thing about voting is that it's private. You can vote for Mr. A and tell Miss B you voted for her. Nobody knows the difference. I didn't want people to have to do that. So not only did I tell people they could run against me, I explained what steps they'd have to go through to run for the office. I explained furthermore that if they didn't have the money to pay the filing fee, they could, it's called impoverished if you're going to go to court and you can't pay the filing fees, that if you can't pay that filing fee, there's a way for you to have it waived or set aside, and anybody can run against me who wants to. Sometimes people did, most of the time they didn't. But as a result of that, brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and neutrals, my term in that legislature spanned parts of 2 centuries, the 20th century and now the 21st century. A score is 20 years. I spent more than 2 score years in that legislature, the better part of 5 decades. Most of my life, more than half of it, was spent in that legislature. You know why? Not for the money. We make $12,000 a year before taxes. I don't take handouts. I have not looked for a job where somebody would just pay me just so they could give me money. Whatever I have, I earned with my own hands. I saved. In the years long ago, I was invited to give speeches all over the country at universities, and I would get what they called an honorarium. My mother had taught me when I was little, Ernie, if you make 35 cents, save a dime. In those years, to let you know how long ago it was, 35 cents was something. You all probably don't even know what a dime is unless you talk about a bag of something, which is another subject. But at any rate, I decided long ago, as Whitney Houston said in one of her songs, I could not determine what I was going to do with my life based on what other people did or said. I was reared in a church, the Church of God in Christ. They professed to believe the Bible as it was written, but their conduct did not square with what was in the Bible, which I call the Bible. And in those days, if you got smart, as they call it, these old people would slap you. And yet in the Bible, Jesus had said, bring the little children unto me and forbid them not, for such is the kingdom of God. And unless you become as a little child, you will in no way enter the kingdom of heaven. But the part I like, which the old Christians didn't believe and people don't believe now, he that offends against one of these my little ones, it were better that a millstone be hanged around his neck and he be drowned in the depths of the sea. People say things like that. They don't mean it. Children are precious to me. All children. Children are not evil. No child is. Children are shaped by their parents. They're misled by their parents. They're mistaught by their parents. That's why I would never judge a child by what his or her parents are, will say, or do. I don't judge that child by what he or she says or does, because children are like sponges. They absorb. Then they can only give that which they've received. So if they say bad things, it's because they got it from home, church, or someplace else where hateful adults are. I decided that nothing that I had seen in anybody based on conduct was what I wanted to be. I would take those things that I thought were true and I would live according to them the best that I could. I would be lying if I said that every decision I made in my whole life was in accord with what I believed. But when it wasn't, I took a whipping internally that nobody could put on me. I would rather have been slapped or hit in my mouth than to take that whipping that my own conscience put on me. I don't care how great something may have seemed to other people. If that one inside of me knew it wasn't my best, he said, Ernie, that I don't care what they say, and you don't care what they say. If you want your head to rest easy on your pillow tonight and sleep to come and rest on your eyelids, you better straighten up and fly right. So I developed an internal compass that guided my conduct. And I was true to it. I am true to it wherever I am, with whomever I'm dealing, whatever company I'm in. I dress the way I do because that's the way I am. What you see is what you get. And if you don't like it, you don't have to look. That's why you can swivel your head on your neck. Mother Nature takes care of that. And if she can't do that, she gave you another alternative. That's why you have eyelids that you can close. You don't have to look at me. You don't have to listen to me. Here's what I'm getting to. Those white people in the legislature quickly found out that whatever kind of black person they had met before, he or she was not like me. I was not going to grin when nothing's funny. I was not going to scratch when I didn't itch. I wasn't going to take sand out of my pocket, spread it on the floor, and come shuffling in and say, hello, boss, I'm happy to be here. I just graduated from the cool school. None of that for me. And the problem, and this is what I'm getting to, is that I learned their rules too well as far as they're concerned. I could stop that entire legislative process. I didn't grab anybody. I didn't shout people down. I read their rule book. I mastered it. And I could stop that entire legislative process whenever I chose just by using their rules. And they said I abused the rules. I said, you can't say that to me because you wrote them. Whenever I'm speaking, call me on what I'm saying and show where it violates the rules, and they never could. So each session, they changed the rules to try to stop me, and I'm like water. Dam it here, and it'll find a way out here. So eventually, they knew they couldn't stop me, so they grinned when nothing was funny. They had to bear me because I wasn't going anywhere. I referred to the law as you all's law. The Constitution is you all's Constitution. And I tried to preserve it and stop them from putting crazy stuff in it, like protecting trapping, hunting, and fishing. Things like that didn't belong in the Constitution. I had to explain that to them. The white people on the outside of the legislature were embarrassed by their white senators, 48 of them against me. And I would tell them, if Alibaba can handle 40 thieves, I should easily be able to handle 48 of you. And if you think you can stop me, do your best. So they changed the rules each session. It didn't work. White people got angry. They said that I was destroying the legislature. One man out of 49. I said, you white people ought to be ashamed of yourselves. If there were a gathering of 49 people and 48 of them were black and I was one of them, and there was a white guy who did to them what I'm doing to you all, I'd get us aside and say, you ought to be ashamed of yourselves. Don't let this one man outdo you. Learn from him. You wrote the rules. He's whipping you with your own rules. And that's what I did. So you know what the white people did? Because they're treacherous, they are bullying, they are cowardly, they changed their constitution. They changed the basic law of their state so that the people who wanted to send me to the legislature could not do it after I'd served 2 terms together. They call it term limits. So they term limited me out, but they didn't know that I would survive. And 4 years later, I came back. And I told them, you have made me your God. The Bible says in Revelations, God speaking, I am Alpha, I am Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. You made me your Alpha because I'm the first one to be term limited out and the first one to come back. I'm Alpha. There can only be one first. Omega, the last. I will be the last one who will ever serve over 40 years in the legislature. So I am your Alpha and your Omega. And based on the Bible you say you believe in, I am your God. but I will not have you worshiping me. You need to learn from me, but they couldn't bring themselves to do it. I'm being term limited out now, and in January, it's over for me. I looked at the people who are running for the office. I am not a sentimentalist. Young Terrell, all of them are young compared to me. Young Terrell stood head and shoulders above everybody else based on my judgment and my assessment. And when I talked to him about this, I said, "You're not me. Don't try to be me. Be yourself. Set your standard of what is right and wrong. Then you stick to that. And no matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody does, you stick with what you believe, and the people who put you in that office will quickly find out if you really are what you said that you are." And I think he will do that. I would not try to pressure him. I do not anoint, I do not appoint. But when my opinion is sought, then I give it. Now, I've said enough things to give an idea of the kind of person that I am for those who may not know. One other thing, nothing is so ridiculous and pathetic than for an older person to try to act like he or she did many, many years before. I don't believe in this idea of being an old man, stay in an old man's place, but I believe that an old man, if his eyes are open and his mind works, ought to have some wisdom, not just knowledge, some understanding. Know the meaning of words and how to use them, because words have power. Young Brother Terrell can give his own credentials, but he's got a couple of degrees. He's working on a law degree, and it takes a certain amount of mental discipline to do that, especially in these days. Some gumption, stick to itiveness. And one of the sports that always impressed me was wrestling, because it's you and your opponent. People might cheer, they might boo, but you don't have somebody where if you fumble the ball, they'll pick it up and cover for you. If you make a misstep, you have to believe that that opponent knows what you know. And if you misstep, he's going to get you like you got him. When I was studying judo, the first thing is the gentle way. You stand and face each other. When your feet are facing his feet and your legs are straight and his are straight, then that's like a four-legged table. There's stability. You have to get your opponent off balance. So moving quickly, you move back and forth. You kind of do a slow dance, and then you are aiming to get your foot between his 2 feet and do something before he can do you. Because when you have one of your feet between two of his, one of his feet is between yours. So whichever is the fastest, the faster, there are only two, knows the most, is going to be able, using the gentle way, to throw the opponent. No punching, no hurting. It's the gentle way. Wrestling is where there's a good deal of grappling. Sometimes the bone may get broken. So this young man was a state champion a couple of times. And those are the things that I kind of put together in determining my opinion about somebody that I don't know anything about from having grown up around him or spent a lot of time around him. What are the things that he did? What does it take to do those things and be successful? And I saw enough to swing me in his direction. One thing they say you should never do with a politician is put a microphone in front of him or her and say, "Have at it." Well, this gives you an example of why. But when I do speak, I have something to say. And now I'm going to follow the lead of Brother Terrell, whose program this is.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. One of the reasons I decided to run was because I got fed up with the climate of our community. I felt like there's more that could be done, and I felt as though people in certain positions weren't doing enough. I'm not you, but I also felt like now that your seat was opening up, it was important to ensure that somebody that had the people first and had a heart for the community to be in the seat, because it's imperative that we have somebody that's for the people in that legislative seat to protect our community, but also fight for our community as much as possible, which is why I decided to run. How do you feel about the state of our community and what needs to be done going forward?
We have always been dominated by white people. They pass the zoning laws that can restrict us and determine what can be built, where it can be built. They control the real estate market. Sometimes they'll loosen things up a little bit. They're allowing some building going on in the community now, but that's what they call gentrification. They're preparing it so that they can take it over. It started many years ago, and I tried to stop it and couldn't, when they ran that highway right through the middle of our community. They ran it between 30th Street and 24th Street, and I tried to explain to people, but they wouldn't see it. These businesses along these two strips, 30th and 24th, make a lot of money from the drive-by traffic. People going by will stop and get something when they see a place to buy it. Even white people passing through, and they were not afraid. They had no reason to be afraid anyway. They would stop. But when they built that highway, it cut off that drive-by traffic because everything passed through, even black people. Because if you can take a straight shot at where you got to go, that's what you will do. 30th Street began to die and wither on the vine. 24th began to die and wither on the vine. Black people with businesses could not get loans because they didn't have the security or collateral to back it up. That just means if I borrow 10 cents from you, I've got to have 12 cents of value. So if I don't pay you, then you can convert what I've got into cash by selling it and getting your money. Well, if your business is going belly up, you don't have any means by which to get a loan. But our area was redlined anyway. In our area, there were loans that we could not get. We could not get the kind of insurance that was needed. And white people all worked together, and they liked this part of the city. Whenever a city is started, it will usually grow up along a river because the river provided transportation and you could move goods if you needed them. The land would be fertile and you could grow crops if that's what you wanted to do. So this was all inhabited by white people, then Jews, a few Italians, but most of those after a while who came here ran businesses that took from the community and never gave back. But this area is flat, not a whole lot of tall hills that you have to climb in the winter and so forth. So they wanted to get it back. The way to get it back is to strangle it and then take it. So you have Susie Buffett, and I know people love Susie. She's got her own stable of black men, and I've said it down through the years. I don't fear her daddy, Warren Buffett. I don't fear Susie Buffett. I don't fear Stothard. Ben Gray and these people run after Susie. And there was a time when Ben talked to some of the young guys who were in gangs. And I told Dan, who was in the barbershop with me, that he needed to warn Ben because Ben was taking them in a direction they didn't want to go. He wanted them to allow Susie to come and talk to them, and they couldn't figure it out until it became clear that they were to be showpieces to show Susie that he was into something, that he's gotten in with these gang members, and they were going to let him come and do something to him. And I told Dan to let him know. But at any rate, Susie Buffett is buying up a lot of land. She's bought up a lot of land around the 24th and Lake Street area. That building called the Union, Susie owns that. There used to be a church called Jesus Only on 25th and Erskine. She bought that, tore the church down. They're getting it cleared out. And guess who's going to be there when they decide to build? Black people are often in a holding action. They want us to stay there until they get ready to take it, and then they're going to take it. We don't have the power to stop them. But if we would all coalesce and come together, there are ways that we can magnify what strength we do have and make a difference. Now, people don't like to think about politics as a way to get things done. The thing that would be most effective for us and every disadvantaged community is to register and vote. The two things that drive everything in this country: politics, money. Money buys the politicians. Politicians do what the money says do. The politicians go where money says go. So I was talking to some young people, black and white, down by the city county building or civic center. And I was telling them that I'm pleased that they're out here with their demonstrations, expressing their points of view. Then I pointed to the courthouse and I said, but that building is where the decisions have been made that cause you all to be out here on this street. The people get into that building by way of the ballot box. People vote them in. Don't let anybody tell you voting is unimportant. You know what caused the Klan to really come after black people? When the Voting Rights Act passed, and white people, young Jewish people also, came down south to help black people register. 3 young black men, Michael Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, were murdered and buried in an earthen dam because of the attempt to help people vote. The Klan burned crosses on lawns, blew up churches when black people started voting. They weren't worried if 2 or 3 of us got guns, because they've got more than we have, and that made us an easy target, and we're not going to use the guns on them. All of these recent shootings show that the man is still in command. Down through the years, I've condemned the police department, the federal government, the FBI, all of these agencies, because the guns are too readily available to young black men. I went in the barbershop one day and I asked, can somebody tell me where I can get a gun? And one young guy, he wasn't 16 years old, he said, Senator Chambers, I can get you a gun quicker than I can get you a candy bar. Well, if these kids know where the guns are, you know where the police know where they come from, and the police might facilitate them getting these guns. If the guns were turned on white people, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be turned on anybody, but as long as we do things to each other, they're going to make sure we have the instrumentalities to do it. All of this recent shooting, you think the police don't know where these guns come from? So here's what I told the chief, and I've told others. If these kids know where to get the guns, the cops know where to get these guns. They know where they're coming from. But as long as they're used by black kids on black people and each other, the guns will continue to flood our community. When that lady cop Orozco got killed, do you know they traced the origin of that gun to some pawn shop or other down in Alabama? If they can trace it all the way there, they can't tell where these guns are coming from in Omaha, and you're going to see more shooting. Don't put it past white people and the cops to let some of these kids know that you can do this and you'll get away with it. But let them do something to a white person and you'll see what happens. You know why I'm talking like this? I don't want us to do bad things to each other. I want us to use a weapon that the white man knows the power of. The vote is the most powerful weapon that we have, and it's the most effective tool that we have. That's why they get us to mock voting. Politicians first look at your area to see how many people register. If a large number register, then they're going to look and see how many vote. Now, if you don't register and you don't vote, you can say all you want to. You can march until your shoes wear out and you're never going to get anything. because eventually you're going to get tired. Eventually, the media will not cover you because you're no longer a story. People are going to go back to doing what they were doing, and it'll be just like it was before. So while there is a wave, ride the crest of that wave and convert it to political action. Then people will listen to you. And before they will listen to you, you've got to have something in your head. If you go to church, pick the verses that mean something to you, that will give you guidance. There was one of those old prophets, a crybaby prophet. He said, "Oh, that my head were water and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for my people. My people perish for lack of knowledge." We need knowledge. Now, I'm putting a heavy load on this young man. He put himself in a position for me to do that. He said he can do the job, but here's where I'm not unfair. He cannot get rid of poverty. Jesus told you the poor you have with you always. All of the presidents who've been in office have talked about poverty, but they haven't gotten rid of it. The Catholic Church addresses poverty issues. They haven't gotten rid of it. Councils, city councils, county boards, legislatures, all of them have said they're going to do something about poverty. I hope you all in my community, your community, our community, will not let ourselves be put in a trick bag and we'll vote, look at this young man and say, the people in his district are poor. There are some districts poorer than ours in the rural areas. Only in the Black community are we dumb enough to let white people point to one Black person and say, he ought to do it. He ought to give you better schools. He ought to solve these problems that all of the governments, all of the social welfare agencies, all of the nonprofits haven't solved. Why think he's going to solve it when he's going to be swimming upstream? He's going to be going against the wind. He's going to be lifting the heavy end of the law. He won't be able to trust anybody. We have to be fair. We have to be understanding, develop political maturity. And here's what I tell those white people because they think I'm as cowardly as they are. I said the flag is a rag, and they got furious. And I said it again. I said, wherever I see the American flag, then I know that I'm not welcome there. It is the northern version of the Confederate battle flag. Look at the motorcyclists who fly the flag behind them. Look at these people who wear flag clothes. They also wear Nazi helmets. They're the ones who would use the N-word. They're the ones who gang up. So when I make my comments on the floor of the legislature, not hiding, where everybody can hear me, then they would call my office and cuss at the woman who answers the phone and make threats to her. And I told them they were cowards. Now, I don't want anything to happen to me. Obviously, I want to live. I'm 83 years old, and I still can walk. I can still lift a little bit of weight. But here's the point that I would make to them. Anybody who wants to do something to somebody, if they really want to, it can be the president, and it will be done. The woman who works in my office, there are two young women there now. I said, they're not the ones who said anything. I said it. I come around you all every day. I'm not like you all. I'm not strapped. I don't carry a gun. Can't hide a gun. I don't carry a knife. And I'm an easy target. Not inviting anything. But I don't want anybody to be hurt because somebody is upset with me. I told them, and I'll say it here because I say it on the floor of the legislature. I come down to this place where white people are every day, drive 130 miles every day to this so-and-so job. I don't use bad words. I'll say so they'll know what it is. The parking lot is across the street from the Capitol building. I don't carry a gun like some of these senators do. I cross the street to come to the Capitol building. I cross the street to go back to my car. Sometimes I get there when it's still not a lot of daylight, and I often leave when it's dark. So if all these tough people who are going to call my office and cuss these women out want to confront me, I'm easy to find. I don't hide from anybody, and I don't put anybody out there to do anything in my behalf. So that's what I told them about their flag. And I said, you all don't even know how you display the flag. The law tells how the flag should be displayed. For one thing, it should be no part of an athletic uniform. It should be no part of an athletic uniform. It should not be a flag patch on a helmet. The flag is never to come in contact with the ground. When you have those flag patches, they're going to touch the ground. That's against the law. Now, you won't be punished for it, but there's a proper way, they say, to display and respect the flag. Now, when Nike put these flag shoes out, they should have been condemned for putting the flag on the shoe, because the U.S. Code also says the flag should be no part of an article of clothing. And not only is it a part of attire on the shoe, it's on the ground. So when that shoe was attacked, they attacked the black man who didn't think the flag should be on the shoe. But these white people don't know anything. They can get away with being stupid, for being ignorant. And it's why I won't argue with them about the race problem. They don't know their history. They don't know our history. I educate them, and I tell them on the floor, arguing with you about race when you don't know anything would be like Einstein arguing differential equations with somebody who can't do short division. Arguing with you on these issues about which you're profoundly ignorant would be like me on a street corner arguing with a drunk under the street light, and he doesn't even know what we're talking about, but he's making noise, and I'm out there trying to reason with him. I'm the fool, not him. We need to get some brains operational between our ears. The brains are there. Now, I'm not going to have this many opportunities to talk to you all if anybody's out there listening. So I have to take my opportunities when I get them. I'm not trying to be disrespectful of my young brother, but would you allow me to read something that I offered as an amendment to a bill in the legislature?
Yes.
Whenever I offer an amendment, it's printed in the journal. That journal becomes a part of the history of the legislature. It'll be there forever. Oh, and by the way, black people in my community, I live on 19th and Benny, wanted to name a little park that doesn't cover really much more than a quarter of a block. It's as close to my house as Serena Williams could hit a tennis ball if she hit it hard. And these racists on the city council said no, they wouldn't do it. The black people wanted to do it, and I said, all you're going to do is get your feelings hurt. They're going to insult you. White people can have things done in their community, but they control what's in our black community. And sure enough, the city council voted against it. There were some white people not on the council who said it should have been done. It was shameful that the council did what they did. But they're White Citizens Council, which is another name for the Ku Klux Klan. So I find ways to get my information out there. We have a bill pending that deals with sex trafficking, which I'm opposed to. But I believe in getting to the heart of these matters. A slaveholder was a sex trafficker. They raped these young black girls, raped black women, made babies on them, and then sold their own children. They're rapists of the worst order. This Weinstein, or whatever Stein he is, who died, and this British woman who they caught because she helped set up these young girls, he was following in the footsteps of the men that caused me to write this amendment. The bill is before us. It's LB 518. It may come up during the last few days that we have. We go back into session July 20th. And this is what we'll be waiting when that bill comes up. And this is printed in the Legislative Journal. Given, I list the place in that bill where this will be inserted. And this is word for word what my amendment says. Given the subject matter and intent of this legislative bill, it shall be considered within the context of the sordid history of America relative to human trafficking and sexual exploitation visited upon enslaved persons by slaveholders. Therefore, it is appropriate to recognize and acknowledge some of the more renowned members of the quote, All American Pantheon and Register of Human Traffickers, unquote, which is hereby created. Charter members shall include 1, President George Washington, 2, President Thomas Jefferson, who said all men are created equal, 3, President James Madison, 4, President Andrew Jackson, 5, President James Monroe, all these slaveholders, all of them. Then Alexander Hamilton, who was Secretary of the Treasury. But let me read on. Alexander Hamilton, number 6. Number 7, Patrick Henry, who said, give me liberty or give me death. And I have to depart for a second for this reason. Patrick Henry was giving his speech to what amounted to the Virginia legislature. He was speaking against King George in Virginia. And he talked about how horrible the treatment was of the colonists. And he asked, is life so precious or peace so dear as to be bought with chains and slavery? I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. That's what the white man said. He wasn't a slave. Well, there was a black man who was a slave who lived in Virginia, and his name was Nat Turner. And these white people know everything. And Patrick Henry was respected. And he said, is life so precious or peace so dear as to be bought with chains and slavery? And I see all of my people in chains. And he said, give me liberty or give me death. Then he is giving me the blueprint for how I should feel and how I should get my freedom. And Nat Turner led a rebellion. And they killed a lot of white people. And Nat Turner's portrayed by white people as vicious, cruel, and all the negatives they put on anybody who stands against him. But he followed the blueprint laid out for Patrick Henry. If liberty or death is good enough for the white man, why is it not good enough for the black man who has literal chains, who can watch his women raped, his young girls raped by presidents, trafficked, sold like livestock, cows, pigs, and chickens, and brutalized all the day long? So there was Patrick Henry. Francis Scott Key. He was the one who wrote what you all call your national anthem. And it talks about the land of the free and the home of the brave. And old Francis Scott Key was a slaveholder. And when he said, the flag, oh, can you see, by the dawn's early light, what so proudly we hail. You know what battle that flag was being, what battle the flag was flying over? The Battle of New Orleans. You know who was fighting that battle for America? Andrew Jackson. And he was not doing that well. And in New Orleans, the majority of the population comprised black men. And Andrew Jackson, using the trickery and the lying of these white people, this is history. You all don't know it. White people don't know it. And Andrew Jackson's face is on the $20 bill. When it was agreed that he should be replaced on subsequent $20 bills by Harriet Tubman, who fought for this country, who fought to end slavery, Donald Trump, you all's president, nullified that and said it won't happen during my presidency because I think Andrew Jackson was a great man. So whoever is president after me can do that if he wants to. It had already been agreed. That's what they do to black people. And you all act like these white people care about you. Why, you must be out of your mind. But to continue, but Andrew Jackson, because a slaveholder, one who will rape women and little girls, is also a liar. He made a pitch to the black men in that city and told them that if they would fight, because they were fighting against the British wanted to do something to these white racists, what all would be done for the black men and so forth. And this has happened and had happened before during the Revolutionary War and every war this country ever had. The black men answered the call. They fought on the side of America. The Battle of New Orleans was won. Right back to the Madison or slavery. Andrew Jackson did not keep his promise. And you all are supposed to love Andrew Jackson. And by the way, you heard me mention Alexander Hamilton, the one this play is about. He was a slaveholder. He was the one who put your mama in slavery. He's the one who make a baby on your mama, your sister, your daughter. Yeah, Alexander Hamilton. And I'm almost through with this. John Hancock. You know that Hancock Insurance Company? If you look at the Declaration of Independence, he signed his name bigger than anybody else. He was a slave smuggler. And if you know anything about poetry, you've heard this. Listen, my children, and you shall hear the midnight ride with Paul Revere. The 18th of April, 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that day, that famous day and year. And then the part of it you all know. He said, anyway, you're supposed to hang this lantern up in the North Church Tower as a signal light. One if by land, two if by sea. I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm to every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up into arm. It was not to fight the British. And there was another man named William Dawes who had a ride too. And you know what Paul Revere was riding for? And Dawes to warn John Hancock that the British were coming. They were after him because John Hancock was a slave smuggler. Oh, you didn't know John Hancock, whose name is on the insurance company, was a slave smuggler? Because you don't read and you don't know anything. And finally, Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Roger Brooke Tawney, a Roman Catholic who is famous for having said, the black man has no right that any white man is bound to respect. All of these 10 famous men would be in the Sex Trafficker Hall of Fame. And it goes on. Such register shall be kept, maintained, and prominently displayed in a location determined by the governor and accessible for public viewing. Additional names accompanied by factual documentation supporting placement on such register may be submitted by any person to the governor for consideration for such placement. Following a public hearing in accordance with the Open Meetings Act at a location determined by the governor at which public comments shall be taken, a determination shall be made whether or not a suggested name or names shall be included in such register. The governor, the attorney general, and the secretary of state serving as a committee of 3 shall make such determination by majority vote. Rejection of placement of a name shall not be a bar to resubmission of such name if it is accompanied by additional supportive facts. That's my amendment. That's the one I will offer. That's why I conduct myself in that legislature. If black people are ashamed, you shouldn't have sent me down there. You didn't send me down there to play the role of Uncle Tom, Uncle Remus, or a Ben Gray, or a Chris Rogers. You sent me down there to show what we are made of. I am aspirational, and I hope inspirational. I practice what I preach. I've never stabbed a black man in the back. Black men I have helped them keep their jobs, stabbed me in my back. And the lady who works for me would see where I was going to help one. She'd say, Ernie, why would you help him? When he stabbed you in the back, you'll strengthen his hand, he'll do it again. I said, no. She said, why not? I said, when I help him now, I'll do it with my back to the wall. And that's the way that I am. I have to do what seems right to me, according to my standards. I'm not asking anybody for anything. This community can never put its finger on any time when I made an appeal to this community to come stand behind me. When I said the police are our ISIS, and I was attacked by Governor, by Mayor Stothard, by Police Chief Schmaderer, by some of those who are in Congress, members of the legislature. I was there by myself in that legislature, and I stand unmoving, eyes unwavering, and let them say what they had to say. And I answered them every one. And you never heard me whimper. You never heard me say, why don't you all come down to the legislature and say that you support me? These white people know that I'm not afraid of them, and I will stand alone and face them down in their legislature. And you know how the thing ended? I said, I've listened to everything you all have said. You're a bunch of fools and cowards. So I'm going to quote Santa Claus. And I threw my head back and said, ho, 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 ho. That's the way your representative, those of you who voted for me, and even those who didn't. That's the kind of man you sent down there. Now, I'm not saying that I would even want young brother McKinney to do as I do, because his name is Terrell McKinney, not Ernie Chambers. I lived a different kind of life than he did. There are not many people who will be as hated in this state as I am hated. They gutted a branch of government to get rid of me. I tried to explain to them that the legislature is the branch of government that represents the people directly. The courts don't represent the people. They interpret and apply the law. The governor does not represent the people. The governor executes the law. The body that represents the people directly is the legislature. No matter how long I live, I'm not going to be here forever. Don't gut this legislature, which is throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You're working against your own best interest. You're robbing your own till, but they went out and persuaded these white people to say that you could only serve 2 terms back to back. And you know what they're saying now? The white people even. That was a mistake. That's because they won't listen. They are ignorant. They are hate-filled. They will hurt themselves to try to stop one black man, and they slowed me down, but they didn't stop me. Now, I doubt, well, not let me try to talk about the future, but I let them know and tried to explain to them that if you get term limits, you're getting rid of 48 of your kind to try to get rid of one black man. What kind of sense does that make? And here's where Nebraska is different from every other state. You have a one-house legislature. In other states where they have 2 houses, if they're term limited out of their House of Representatives, they can immediately run for the Senate, and the one in the Senate can run for the House, and you still have the people with all this experience in the government making the laws. They're just in different houses now, or different rooms in the House. In Nebraska, you all are so simple-minded. You have one house. And when you put everybody out, all these new people come in. The governor controls them. They don't know the players. The lobbyists can purchase them. They don't learn. And they're going to be played like a violin and a yo-yo on the end of a string. And I will have the last laugh, except it will be a bitter laugh. You all who did this are not the ones who suffer. The people who are to be served by the legislature will suffer. Those without a voice will be voiceless. Those without a friend will be friendless. The children who have no shoes on their feet will continue to be barefooted. Those who have no place to live will remain homeless. Those who are innocent but nevertheless put in prison will stay there with nobody to even try to look after their interests. Consider the damage that they did, and then you determine how much you ought to trust them when they tell you whom you ought to support and how you ought to conduct your affairs. Remember this, I'm 83 years old. It was 50 years ago since I was in a position that this young man is in. He is not me, but he can be what we need in terms of somebody who's going to inform himself on the issues, who has already shown he can be a grappler in a contest where it's just him against that other him. He had the gumption to get his master's degree. He's studying to get a law degree. And we know that badges and titles mean no more than what the one wearing them will make them mean. But even somebody as young as Brother Terrell has lived long enough to have established a track record of his own, to show the things that are important to him, to show how much work he's willing to put forth to get where he wants to go. He has a long life in front of him if nothing untoward comes and if death doesn't surprise him prematurely. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I could live 1,000 years, and when death comes to me, it's going to be premature. And Brother Terrell, you just have to realize that when I get the opportunity to speak, and I can speak to where we will hear it and where the enemy will hear it, then people will say that, yeah, I guess a person who's black can be a man, can say, I'm never going to walk in anybody's shadow. So I tell you again, in front of everybody, you're not me, you're your own man.
Right.
Do what you know how to do the best way you can. But unlike what happened to me, if you need somebody to talk to along the way, well, you know how to find me.
Yep. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate your words. Before we get out of here tonight, I wanted to ask you, do you think there's any unfinished business that you wish you could have got done while you were in the legislature?
I wish I did get the death penalty repealed, but I wish that could be done away with. But it's a heavy burden, and I don't know whether you can get a bill like that passed. But I would not lay out a list of things to do because I don't want to set your agenda.
Right.
It won't take you long, and we will have opportunities to talk other than in a forum like this. And that's when we will just lay everything on the table. But here, we're not going to strategize in front of the enemy, and not every enemy is white. Here's what a black kid did. Then I'm going to back off. He once heard his parents talking and some other people, and they said colored in those days. Colored blood is so strong that one drop will make a white man colored. And that amazed him. So he's thinking, now little kids think people are their friends. He had a white friend. He really liked this guy, and this guy liked him. So the thought occurred to him, one drop of black blood will make a white man colored. So he provoked his friend into fighting him. Then he let his friend hit him in the nose, and he bled. And he made sure that he bled on his friend. And then he said that he watched him all afternoon when they went back in class and told his father and mother, that doesn't work, because he had a whole lot of blood on him and he's still white. He didn't turn color. So sometimes our children hear things and take them just the way we say them and think that's what is meant. But if there are any of you all who believe that literally, we mean that the attitude that white people take is that if any white person has one drop of black blood, but how about when they were mixing all their white blood in the bodies of our young black women and our young girls? Thomas Jefferson took a 14-year-old black girl named Sally Hemings to France with him. Now, what do you call it when a grown man travels across state lines and would go into another country with a young girl for immoral purposes? And he made babies on Sally Hemings. And finally, after all these years, it's acknowledged by Jefferson's descendants that the Hemings family and theirs share blood. But that's the way things go.
Next week, we're going to be talking about education, and I think it's really important. But during this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic, there's a lot of concerns from parents and teachers and educators about returning back to school. How do you feel about kids returning back to school?
All of this is being driven by Trump, who is, I think, certifiably insane. And all he wants to do is be able to point to something when the election comes and says, I got the schools open and all of these things. And he doesn't care whether children are ill. I bet his son won't be going to a public school where he can get ill. You don't see him turning Manila, his wife, out there in the crowds with all these people so she can get sick. And he looks to me like he's sick. When he's coming down off that airplane, he used to would walk and he'd have his hand on the rail. Now he kind of uses it for support. And he tells people that COVID-19 is a hoax. Oh, and so people know that the coronavirus is not new. There are other coronaviruses, but this is called the new coronavirus because it's a different strain. So COVID means corona virus disease 2019. So this is the coronavirus version of 2019, and that distinguishes it for scientific and medicinal purposes. So this virus, a strains of it are known, but this one is behaving differently, and it's going to lay people low. And there are some people still accepting this silliness from Trump that you don't have to worry about it. Well, when you get it, you will holler, yes, indeed. But don't let anybody fool you into thinking it's not serious. Whenever I'm around people, I wear a mask. I don't care what anybody thinks or says. I believe what the scientists say. I follow what the doctors say. And you can never hurt yourself by being careful. You can end your life by being careless. And it hurts Black people and Latinos more than any other groups, not because we don't wash our hands and so forth, but we're in what they call these essential services. See, the services are essential, but the people are expendable. So our health is not taken care of. We go someplace and get infected and take it home to our children, to those in our communities, and the racism that ravages us in every way is like a double whammy when it comes to this disease. We have these kind of jobs where we work. There's no protection, no garments, no masks, no social separation, none of the things that have been recommended. But we have to be there. Take care of your family. You have the feeling of responsibility. But then it strikes, and there's nothing for you except sometimes a slow, torturous death. So on opening the schools, first of all, Trump, the federal government does not provide the bulk of the money for schools. The state and in sometimes locations do a little bit because property tax will come from locations. But anyway, he likes to threaten, he likes to bully. But if I had a child, I would make the determination as to whether my child went to school. And if I thought that there was a chance of my child contracting one of these diseases, I wouldn't let my child go. I'm the father. It's my responsibility, and I wouldn't let some pathological liar and sociopath in the White House dictate to me what will become my child. So we'll just have to see what they do. But here's one thing, and I'm going to talk to the superintendent about it, of schools. All these statues are coming down. Woodrow Wilson's name was taken off of a college building because President Woodrow Wilson, an out and out racist. Why then have a school named, yeah, go ahead and say it.
Burke High.
Yeah, Burke, for the one who said
Right.
black people will never be in this school. But then there's another one where our young children go. Lewis and Clark. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. William Clark was a slaveholder. He had a slave named York who he dragged with him. This has been called a minority majority school district, more black children than white children, and black children go to a school named after a slaveholder. So I'm going to talk to the superintendent, and I think Mark Snow, who is the president of the school board, unless he doesn't know, has an obligation to do something about that. And Ben Gray, who sits on the city council, should do something about Lewis and Clark Landing. It was named that by the mayor. The city council can do something about it. Ben, where are you? Chris Rogers, where are you? And superintendent, where are you? You talk a good game. I can't be everywhere, but when it comes to naming, let me mention something. They're probably on the way to the donut shop, but I am the only person, the only living person with his name or her name on any state property. The Judiciary Committee hearing room in the state capitol is named the Ernie Chambers Memorial Hearing Room. No other living person has his or her name on any state property, not one. And yet I'm very hated, I'm disrespected, and all these other things. But they had to make that acknowledgement. So we cannot always determine anything from where a name is placed or what that name is. But I am going to write a letter to Ben, write a letter to the superintendent about this Lewis and Clark Landing and Lewis and Clark Junior High or Middle School, if that's what they call it now. Black children have to attend a school named after a slaveholder. That is not right. So with all of this marching that people are doing in Omaha, and I applaud people for what they're doing, we need information so we can focus on those things that affect us right now. There is literature you can get off this gadget on Lewis and Clark, but you will see nowhere in there the mention of York. And if his name happens to come up, they will not mention that he's a slave. But he is the one who kept Native Americans in many instances from slaughtering Lewis and Clark's expedition, because the Native American people had never seen a black man. They had never seen a man so powerfully built. And he was the one who made it possible for the one who enslaved him to survive. But I'm not going to interrupt anymore.
No, you're good. So next week we'll have school board member Kimara Snipe, and we'll be talking about education. Another thing I wanted to bring up before we got out of here is for our campaign, we're trying to do as much as we can to stay active and in front of the people. And a part of our plan is to raise as many funds as possible to ensure that we get that I am elected into the legislature and beginning next November. And we're starting a campaign. It's called $11 for LD11. We're going to be sharing some graphics and the link to donate. It's 11 for LD11. Be on the lookout for that. Also, do you have any closing words, Senator?
Well, you said 11.
11.
They say put your money where your mouth is. Here are two 11s.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
I appreciate it. And we thank you all for tuning in this week. Next week, again, we'll have school board member Kimmerer Snipe on, and we'll be talking about education and what's going on with our educational system in the state. I thank you all and see you next week. All power to the people.
And stay safe.
Definitely.